Hey everyone, rckts here, and today we're going to be talking about the Primordial. Now, if you didn't see the episode on the Precursors, I strongly recommend you go and see that before checking this one out, because the Primordial was one of the Precursors, technically thought of as the last Precursor. Now, I don't want to get too much into repeating what I did with the Precursors, but I do think that this was an interesting character, so I kind of wanted to give him his own episode. Now, as far as appearance, the Primordial was massive in size, supposedly somewhere around 15 meters tall, 11 meters wide, described as possessing an insectoid head, 4 arms, and 2 degenerate legs. A long segmented tail was attached to the base of the skull, tipped with a 2-meter long barb. Each hand had 3 fingers and a central opposable thumb, and the face of the captive was likened to that of a Eurypterid, or sea scorpion, a creature that the Precursors had allegedly seeded on a number of planets. Its head was flattened with oval compound eyes and insect-like mouth parts. But later, aboard Installation 7, the creature was described as having a large number of legs, which it curled up, pretty much like a spider. The torso was supposed to be grossly fat, and its skin was covered in a glassy crystalline coating. A fine powder often fell from his body, perhaps flood spores, or the same powder responsible for the original flood outbreak. As a gravemind, the Primordial was capable of shifting its form to an extent, kind of like rearranging its limbs and whatnot, so it's kind of believable that his form changed like this. As far as origins go, the Primordials were defeated by the Foreigners around 10 million BC. Many of them transmuted themselves into organic particles to later regain their forms, which over millions of years degenerated, became the Flood. And that was pretty much the last episode. So it's pretty much what happened to the Precursors. Some of them entered deep suspended animation without reducing themselves so much. But the Primordial, he claimed to be the last Precursor, but supposedly he was kind of like a mixing of... He was a very early form of Gravemind, and he was kind of like a mixing of several creatures. Cho theorized there may have been at least 12 creatures inside of this thing, but foreigner researchers were unable to conclusively determine whether the entity was truly connected to the Flood. Maybe, it may have represented a considerably different, more primitive form that would become the Flood later, would evolve into the form of the Flood later. But the Primordial's consciousness was synonymous with that of the later Gravemind. He essentially, when he was killed by the Isodidac later, who was very angry with him, his mind kind of merged with an already formed Gravemind. So it kind of proved that he was connected to the Flood at least somewhat. The Primordial was found by humans. He was transported to Churam Hakor. They found a way to revive the creature when he was in the stasis capsule at a later date. They sealed his prison with a time lock as a further precautionary measure. They were really scared of this creature, even though they treated him as sort of an oracle, asking him questions during the Human-Foreigner Wars. They came to fear him, but also use him. Obviously, he was an oracle, so they asked him a lot of questions. Like I said in the previous episode, when they asked him about the Flood, the answers given to the humans were so horrifying that many of them committed suicide. But following the siege of Churam Hakor, the Didac and a group of Prometheans actually found the prisoner, and only really the Didac faced him in person. Initially, the Didac believed that this Primordial was a hoax, kind of like a psychological weapon, or maybe a last ultimate weapon, last resort sort of thing, in case the humans were about to be defeated. But upon conversing with the creature, the Didact discovered or claimed that it was the last Precursor and that the foreigners had rebelled against the Precursors. They had believed at the time that the foreigners were just kind of handed the mantle from the Precursors, but he actually told them that they had taken it forcefully and that the humans were supposed to get the mantle. Now, the Primordial was the one that was sent to Installation 7 and was interrogated by Mendicant Bias for 43 years and later convinced him, essentially kind of through the logic plague that I talked about in a different episode, that, or he used the logic plague against him, I guess I could say. So it took him 43 years, but Mendicant Bias kind of swayed to his side, referred to him as Master, and kind of gave him free reign over Installation of 7. He kind of like traveled around a large levitating platform around the ring. He moved a lot of the human population en masse to flood research facilities. Interestingly enough, after reclaiming Installation 7, the Isodidact, like I said, imprisoned him in a reverse stasis chamber, interrogated him, and essentially got so mad that he ended up just killing him after finding out there's no cure for the flood, finding out that the foreigners weren't supposed to inherit the mantle, and just essentially forced an artificial decay process equivalent to a billion years to transpire over the course of just a few seconds. So the Primordial was just broken down into physical entropy according to sources. So just heat, really, and randomness. Interestingly enough, the Didact later encountered the gravemind. The Primordial's consciousness had survived the destruction of this body, transferred itself to the Flood's compound mind completely intact, and was intent on exacting its revenge on the Didact in this new form. So the Primordial inflicted unspeakable horrors upon the Promethean before releasing him and allowing him to return to the others, aware that the Didact's resulting madness would demoralize the foreigners and engender chaos and indecision among their ranks. So, very interesting character. I actually really like this character in Halo lore a lot. I think it's a very big, beefy character, huge conscience in the Flood, so really glad that I read up on this. I don't know what the next episode's going to be about, but it will probably be about some sort of technology. So look forward to that. If you learned something, if you like this video, don't forget to like, favorite, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you next time. Shadow Rockets out.